Brain surgery is famously complicated, right? Something only modern science could pull off. But as you're about to see, it looks like some ancient societies may have something to teach us about how to operate in here.
It's February 2022 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Museum of Osteology, also known as the Bones Museum, makes a post about one of its newest artifacts, and the photo of it has the comment section going wild. The image shows an elongated skull with a strange metal implant embedded inside it. The skull found in Peru appears to be human, but the odd stretched-out shape of the bulbous cranial bones could suggest otherwise. The implant itself is coarse and bumpy, and is clearly not an organic part of the skeleton. It appears to be composed of two parts, an eye-like shape on top and a circle at the bottom. Forensic anthropologist Dr. John Verano, who studies prehistoric skulls like this for a living, was stumped when he first saw this image.
I've never seen anything like this. I looked at it and I said, well, doesn't look genuine to me.
Though this implant is rare, perhaps unique, author Heidi Hollis says there's a long history of elongated skulls in Peru.
For us to be able to find elongated skulls, that's not the rare element here. Finding an elongated skull with a metal plate in it, now that takes the cake.
Peruvian archaeologist Julio Teo discovered hundreds of elongated cone-shaped skulls buried in the Paracas region in the late 1920s. And Hollis notes that their surprising appearance makes some wonder if they could have extraterrestrial origins.
In pop culture, we often do see aliens as being portrayed as having an elongated skull. From the popular Aliens movies to the gray aliens witnessed by people said to be abducted by alien beings.
Recent genetic testing of the Peruvian skulls apparently found they had mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown to any human or animal on Earth. And the metal in the skull adds another bizarre dimension.
It's highly unusual to see such perfection done on something so ancient. How and who did this?
We often associate metallic objects with electronics, so maybe this skull implant is some sort of microchip, or in this case, macrochip, for aliens to communicate with their home planet.
We know people microchip their pets to help locate them when they go missing. In the case of dogs and cats, a device the size of a grain of rice is implanted just under the skin, over the shoulder blades. Could this cranial implant actually attract aliens? Does it reveal other ancient secrets? Or is this just one big hoax taking us all for a wild ride? Let's ask the experts.
We turn first to anthropologist Kathy Strain to disentangle fact from fiction.
There have been a lot of known hoaxes in archaeology, in particular with Peruvian skulls, crystal skulls that were found all over the world that were said to have been made by alien technology. Those were fakes. We know that they were cut by a jeweler's equipment, and so it's always possible that something can be hoaxed.
But Strain says there's reason to believe the skull is authentic.
We can see every element of what a human skull looks like. That is not easy to hoax, because bone is bone. We can also date this using radiocarbon, and so that would tell us for certain that it is 2,000 years old.
So since the skull seems to be real, could it actually belong to an ancient alien who visited Earth from another planet? Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart says that though we associate elongated skulls with aliens, there's historical evidence that they are, in fact, human.
This shows what we call cranial deformation. And that means that probably when this individual was very young, boards were strapped to the skull so that it would elongate and change the shape of the skull. It was very prevalent in South America, where this skull is believed to have come from.
Barnhart says it was generally people of elite status from Andean cultures like the Paracas who underwent this practice. Yet we know some people who claim they've been abducted by aliens who say they had metal devices implanted into their bodies. So maybe these are actually alien implants into human abductees who've undergone skull elongation. Or is it possible these South Americans were able to also carry out other complex skull modifications like this?
We have found other skulls that have what we call trepidation and repairs to them. Trepidation is the practice of drilling or removing bone from a head that has undergone trauma. We know we still use this today. Roy from Siegfried and Roy, after he was attacked by the tiger, had to have this done because his brain swelled.
Strange says a recent amazing discovery in Peru in late 2021 may solve the riddle. These are obsidian surgical tools found in what's believed to be a doctor's grave. Strange says this proves ancient South Americans actually had the know-how to perform this dangerous procedure. Yet even though trepanation is a recognized ancient practice, John Verano still isn't convinced this implant is authentic since he's never seen metal like this from that time.
If this skull with its metal implant is genuine, and if it really reflects surgery and implant, of course it would be a significant historic discovery, but given that it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen in metallurgy in the Andes, that's why I have my doubts.
So while John leans toward this being a hoax, there's plenty of other evidence to suggest this is the 2,000-year-old skull of a human who survived a life-threatening surgery.
Our verdict? This skull is most likely an example of ancient trepanation. But until the skull is radiocarbon dated to confirm its age, concluding with absolute certainty that this artifact is authentic would be getting ahead of ourselves.
Take a hike in the remote mountainous area outside Hemet, California, and you might come across a stone surrounded by barbed wire. Come closer, and you'll find this. A large rounded boulder with a strange carving on its face. It's 24 inches squared and looks like an ancient drawing of a maze. It consists of two rectangular boxes, one inside of the other. In the space between the two is a series of parallel lines forming this geometric pattern. A rancher first discovered this stone in 1914 while surveying his property. It's since been fenced off to protect it. Archaeologists have authenticated the maze as a petroglyph from up to 2,000 years ago based on artifacts found nearby. Yet journalist Eric Grundhauser points out this is one maze there's no way to solve.
There's no entry point that actually goes to an end point. So it seems to be a sort of esoteric design.
Grundhauser says some think the petroglyph also resembles another now notorious symbol, the swastika.
Prior to its popularization as a symbol for the Nazi Party, the swastika as a design has actually been used in a number of cultures throughout the world. It has had many meanings, especially in Chinese Buddhism.
In Buddhism, the symbol represents the Buddha's footprints, and in Hinduism and other Eastern religions, it's a sign of prosperity and good luck. Since no one knows who created this petroglyph, some speculate that a possible connection with ancient China is the key.
There is a theory that the 15th century Chinese admiral Zheng He, who put together a fleet to explore the Pacific Ocean, ended up making it to the shore of California, and that the admiral and some Buddhist monks actually came inland and left these carvings along the way.
However, since the design is so unusual, others have a different idea about how it got there.
Given that the carving does not seem to denote any sort of image or symbol that we are immediately familiar with, some believe that it's possible that aliens created this.
Supporters of this theory point out how the design of the petroglyph is similar to that of the circuitry on a computer chip. They say this connects to how some ancient cities like Teotihuacan, Mexico, appear from above to be laid out like a computer circuit board with two large processor chips. So could these be prototypes of computer technology built by advanced ancient alien civilizations?
What's most puzzling about this ancient maze glyph is that it's found in the middle of the desert, far from the trading hubs on the coast. It also doesn't seem to say anything specific. So figuring out the intention behind the peculiar design is a real challenge. Our experts may have some insider insight.
Anthropologist Kathy Strain analyzes the images to see if they reveal any telltale signs of the carvings being made by ancient alien visitors.
I wouldn't expect this to be created by aliens because it's not precise.
We recreated the symbol, and she's right. You can see how most of the lines are subtly curved rather than being perfectly straight. This rules out lasers or other high-tech tools that you'd expect extraterrestrials to use. So could this design be associated with Chinese Buddhist art, as suggested by the tales of Admiral Chung and his voyages?
This petroglyph is located pretty far away from the ocean, and there are no villages, there's no other thing to tell us that in the 15th century a Chinese ship came to the coast of California and came 100 miles inland to create this petroglyph.
So if Chinese explorers didn't carve this, was it the local native people?
One of the older cultures, long before contact, is the Kumeyaay people. Along the coast where this culture lived are other examples of maze-like petroglyphs. We call it the Rancho Bernardo style. And these are diagnostically similar. We know this culture was trading back and forth, perhaps even 100 miles inland. So that is probably the best possibility.
Based on the other ones that we know that are in about 120-mile radius, I believe that they are boundary markers that denote whoever's territory that was.
Our verdict? The Hemet maze stone was likely created by an indigenous group that would have lived in the area many centuries ago, possibly the Kumeyaay. But the petroglyphs' meaning and purpose still remain mysteries.
It's January 2014 in the hottest place in the entire world and the driest desert in North America, Death Valley, California. Jim Norris is part of a scientific research team that's investigating a particular patch of wasteland known as Racetrack Playa, which shows few signs of life, except for this. The photos from Jim's team show side-by-side trails of sand stretching for hundreds of feet, all leading to a field of rocks? That's right, the stones are completely motionless, but the trail behind them suggests they were moving at one time. What's even more mysterious is that these trails often appear overnight.
No one had ever actually observed them moving. It was a mystery that had yet to be solved in the geologic circles, and it seemed to me and some of my friends to be an interesting problem to look at, to see if we could figure out how to solve it.
What's really interesting about these stones is that they appear to have moved themselves. No one, as far as we know, has been down on the floor of the playa moving these stones around.
In fact, these so-called sailing stones have been studied for almost a century, and some believe they might be proof of something called animism.
Animism is this concept that everything, animate, inanimate, rocks, plants, animals, has a soul. Some have wondered if this could actually mean that these rocks are alive. Have they evolved to actually be able to move on their own?
Other popular examples of animism include this Mimosa pudica plant responding to human touch, or this Venus flytrap, which is almost human the way its mouth opens and closes. McCarthy also notes these sailing stones in Death Valley aren't the only rocks said to rock and roll on their own.
There are stones in Romania, called the Living Stones of Romania, which are more officially known as trovants. And they actually grow. And some people even believe that they walk and move on their own.
Scientists say trovants grow after heavy rains when the stones actually secrete cement. This is because of a chemical reaction that happens when the minerals in the stones come into contact with large amounts of water. But could our rocks actually be alive and out for an evening stroll? Or is there something more mysterious at play here? Let's turn to our experts to find out.
First, NASA geologist Dr. Bob Anderson analyzes whether the sailing stones could be living rocks like in Romania.
Living rocks means the rock itself has life in it, that it has bacteria or it has plant-like creatures in their sheer act of growing and moving are moving the rocks. But I do not believe that these rocks are living rocks because it is in a desert area. If these rocks are in a very hot area most of the time, the bacteria would have a hard time to live.
But if these stones are not alive, could someone or something just be dragging them across the sand overnight?
For a long time, people thought that they're aliens because you don't see any footprints. So they can't be man-made. Also, some of these rocks that are moving are very large. They're 700-800-pound blocks that people could not move.
So if the rocks aren't living beings and they're too heavy for humans to move, then could their tracks be caused by extreme weather? We turn to meteorologist Juan Hernandez.
We don't see any movement in the summer. It's too hot, it's too dry. The movement that we see with these stones actually occurs mainly in the late winter and into the early spring.
Hernandez thinks that observation provides a key clue. He suspects that under certain conditions, the racetrack playa could turn into a slippery, shallow pond with moving sheets of ice.
you've got 4 conditions that need to be met for this to actually occur. The first of which is the surface has to be wet. So it had to have rained. The second condition, it has to be cold enough to freeze. The third condition, there has to be partial melting. It has to warm up to maybe the upper 30s, lower 40s. That's when the movement starts to happen. And then it has to be windy to push the rocks across that semi-frozen surface.
But can a breeze really move a 700-pound rock? Hernandez explains that the uniqueness of this location may have something to do with it.
Death Valley is known for its extreme weather conditions, so it's likely going to take potentially 30, 40, even 50-mile-an-hour winds to blow across Racetrack Playa.
It's an interesting theory, but is there data to back it up? That's what Jim's team is for. They developed a cool way to measure the sailing stones. Sailing.
We figured out how to design a GPS system that we could embed in a rock that would just sit and wait for the rock to move. And when the rock started to move, it would start recording the change in position.
The GPS data lined up with the weather conditions Hernandez described. And further proof? Morris's team even caught one of the rocks moving over time in this time-lapse footage.
Our verdict, the sailing stones aren't moved by ghosts, aliens, or animist spirits. This is a rare natural phenomenon caused by extreme weather conditions. Death Valley is home to a menagerie of wildlife. Slithering rocks are not among them. But that doesn't mean there's not something hiding under a rock still waiting to be discovered.
It's 1980 by the Paluxy River near Glen Rose, Texas. Amateur paleontologist Glenn Cuban is on a mission to document a site that became famous since it was first discovered in 1908. This is why. Take a closer look. These are 2 trails of fossilized footprints that cross each other in the riverbank. But while one set of prints belongs to a dinosaur, Glenn says some believe the others are human.
They didn't find any distinct human toes, but we did find these oblong tracks in striding sequences that were larger than normal human feet, but were not obviously typical dinosaur tracks, and they roughly resembled human tracks.
Wait a minute, humans and dinosaurs side by side? Author Eric Grundhauser says according to believers of the young Earth theory, the answer is yes.
They believe in a biblical foundation that the Earth was only created between 4,000 and 10,000 years ago. Now, many people who have observed this site have taken this as evidence that humans and dinosaurs actually lived at the same time. And in a very literal sense, they crossed paths.
Young Earthers or creationists also point to depictions in other cultures around the world that supposedly confirm their beliefs, like this prehistoric cave drawing in Kutaisi, Georgia, that supposedly shows men hunting next to a dinosaur. But take a look at the size of these prints. They are huge.
They are much, much larger than any recorded human that we know of. Could they point to a lost species of human, a giant?
The mystery is complicated by this other set of prints found nearby. They seem to have normal human shape and size, don't they? How did those get here?
In 2020, evidence of stone tools found in Mexico led anthropologists to theorize that the first humans may have come to North America 30,000 years ago, almost 20,000 years earlier than previously thought. So our natural history is continuously changing when new facts come to light. But what are the facts when it comes to these alleged human footprints? We let our experts dip their feet in for answers.
Archaeologist Ed Barnhart says these prints aren't just too big to be human, they're size 35. And even if there were giant humans in our ancient history, they didn't make these prints.
Humans have an arch and toes, and we have a heel. When you really look at this footprint in the way that a scientific investigation does, it lacks those basic elements.
Humans have 5 metatarsal foot bones that connect to their toes. On the other hand, the reptile foot has 3 metatarsal foot bones, characteristically splayed out from the base. So these are the footprints of a reptile, and NASA geologist Dr. Bob Anderson thinks he knows what made these mysterious fossilized impressions.
What we have here is an ancient stream channel where multiple dinosaurs have walked through.
But if both sets of tracks are dinosaurs, why does one look so human?
It's just the way the dinosaur itself was walking across the ground.
Anderson says it's likely one of the dinosaurs was walking with its weight on the back of its feet, so the toes didn't have much contact with the mud. That's why it's less clear the feet only had 3 toes. And in some cases, erosion wore away the toe imprints even further, making the track look almost like it was made by a person wearing a shoe. That still leaves these other photos of prints from nearby, where the human toe, arch, and heel markings are clearly delineated. What about them?
There have been people who have an agenda supporting the idea of creationism and carved the tracks to look like human tracks.
Turns out Barnhart's right. Research reveals that most of the fake prints were carved by a man named George Adams in the 1930s, as his family later acknowledged. Adams decided to create better examples of the alleged giant human tracks in order to sell tickets to tourists during the Great Depression.
The verdict, none of these are prehistoric human tracks. Our experts have laid out explanations for all 3 types of phenomena seen in Glenn's photos: dinosaur metatarsal tracks, erosion, and intentional carvings. There's no evidence that humans ever walked with dinosaurs. So keep enjoying the Flintstones, just take them with a grain of salt. We know that the legendary Bigfoot is indigenous to the Pacific Northwest, but it is far from the only enigmatic hominid said to walk the earth. Australia's Yowie is also described as a hairy ape-like creature. A team of researchers there say they recently shot some high-tech footage that proves it really exists.
In May 2021, Queensland-based Yowie researcher Dean Harrison and his team are testing out infrared cameras at Springbrook National Park. They picked this spot because they believe they've seen traces of Yowie activity among the brush. And that night, they captured this mysterious footage. The thermal imagery seems to show a solitary figure hiding behind or even hugging a large tree trunk.
Now, this is doing what Yowies do. They hug a tree, pretend they're a part of a tree if there's a human in the area, and they just blend. So you can see him just putting his head in.
Minutes later, the image changes. Now it looks like there's a couple.
2 giant creatures emerge from the foliage, and one is bending down to pick up something.
As it bends over, you can also make out what looks like one of the creature's heads. It looks cone-shaped. The figures are large with wide shoulders and ape-like proportions. Field researcher Cliff Barrickman, who has been to Australia to study the Yowie, says the footage aligns with descriptions from indigenous peoples going back centuries.
All of the Aborigines down there have drawings on the walls of caves depicting these things. They're prevalent in their storytelling traditions as well. But then the settlers came in the late 1700s, and they too started running into Yowies, which is another very strong indicator that they're a real biological animal.
Now, Bigfoot-like creatures are part of folklore the world over. Nepal has the Yeti, Mongolia has the Alma. And one theory is that they all descended from a single Asian ancestor, some of whom made it to Australia, while others crossed the Bering Land Bridge, came to North America, and evolved into Bigfoot. If this video is real, it could help prove that theory, but that's a big if.
There's some sort of subject, creature, person, if you will. It's something that's emitting a heat signature. And as we go through different FLIR filter arrays, this object's movement is consistent. There is something happening in here that's moving around.
Look at the footage with this filter. Now the head comes into better view. It appears to have a pronounced sagittal crest, a ridge of bone along the top of the cranium. It's similar to what's seen in the skulls of the early hominid Australopithecus, which some believe to be the common ancestor of Bigfoot, Yowie, and other similar creatures. But Primo is cautious.
Although we have not found any evidence to support that the recording was fabricated, we have no idea what is being depicted here.
Next, our zoologist Roxy Furman analyzes the anatomy of the figures.
What we can see clearly at one point is that there are 2 animals pictured. It also looks like it's a bipedal animal, which means it walks on 2 legs.
That might have you thinking primate, but here's a key fact. There are no known primates native to Australia. In fact, the only bipedal animals are the cassowary and the kangaroo, which look nothing like this. So how do we explain the heat signatures in those head shapes? Furman thinks she may have the answer. People wearing headlamps.
That would explain why the head's a slightly strange shape.
That would mean the people were either misidentified or they're participants in an elaborate hoax, maybe Australia's version of the Patterson-Gimlin film, if that was a hoax too. But anthropologist Kathy Strain says that in this case, size does matter. The research team went back to the spot in daylight and measured the tree, matching the thermal footage as best they could to get a sense of the size of the figures in the infrared video.
Whatever it is more than 8 feet tall. The possibility of them being human is highly unlikely. I came to the conclusion that what this video shows are 2 real Yowie. I think it is one of the most significant films taken in at least 50 years.
So yes, there's a possibility that this is a hoax. But based on Professor Strain's estimate of the creature's height, we're going to say these are possible Yowies.
May 21st, 2022, Amarillo, Texas. It's around 1:25 a.m. and the zoo's security cameras are keeping their sleepless eyes on its animals when they capture this. A strange figure just outside the zoo's perimeter lurks in the darkness. As we push in, the figure appears to be standing on 2 legs just on the other side of the fence, looking inside. Shocked by the size of the creature and its rather wolf-like head, the Amarillo Zoo has begun asking the general public for help figuring out what this UAO, unidentified Amarillo object, could be. Take another look. This bipedal creature is quite puzzling. The image goes viral with thousands of people viewing it.
Now let's take a closer look at this image. A lot of folks have said they can discern fur on this thing's arms and pointed ears on its head. On the other hand, some people say it's standing like a human and it looks like it's wearing pants. And they see this as a jacket. As for me, I have no idea.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt cites the figure's resemblance to an infamous creature from folklore.
One of the theories is that it could in fact be a chupacabra, a famous creature that has been talked about throughout Latin American culture since the 1990s and is a blood-sucking type of creature. The name chupacabra actually means goat sucker because it's been alleged that these creatures will drink the blood of goats and other small farm animals. I've examined the remains of several creatures that have been called chupacabras, and all of those animals displayed very dog-like features. Pointy ears, long snouts, strange skin, long fangs, other physical abnormalities.
During a 2-month period in 2010, more than 300 goats were slaughtered in rural Mexico. Ranchers believe these deaths resulted from a chupacabra stalking their livestock. So could this image be a chupacabra stalking the zoo? Our experts investigate.
Professor of biology Floyd Hayes begins by estimating the size of the creature.
To me, it looks like the fence itself may be 12 feet high. The animal looks like it's maybe 6 feet behind the fence, which would make it smaller. It appears to be about half the height of the fence. It's maybe about 7.5 feet tall.
That's much bigger than the alleged size of a chupacabra. And there's another issue.
The chupacabra is allegedly a quadrupedal or 4-legged animal, but this appears to be bipedal rather than quadrupedal. Bipedal means it's walking on 2 legs.
Next, wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler examines the creature's hair.
Chupacabras are described as being more hairless with gray and scaly skin. In this image, it seems to be more shaggy. It seems to have long hair, especially on top. So it doesn't fit the description.
And even though sightings of the creature have been reported, Shuttler says the proof has yet to be discovered.
Any evidence of animals that were thought to be chupacabras, it always ended up being a canid species like a coyote, dog, or fox with mange.
Demodectic mange is caused by a parasitic mite that lives in the hair follicles of canines. To rid themselves of the parasites, canines will scratch their fur and skin until it falls off. But the biggest red flag of all, why the zoo only released one image of such a startling discovery?
Camera traps, when they're triggered, they usually take multiple photos. So I would love to see the photos before and after. There's rarely a singular photo of an animal when the cameras are triggered. I suspect this was a publicity stunt by the Amarillo Zoo. If they really wanted to figure out what this animal was, there would definitely be more photos of it.
Now, hold on a second. If this is a hoax, then the zoo has been keeping up the deception for months. Our verdict? Unidentified creature. A Seattle-based company specializing in wireless cameras donated 80 color night vision cameras to the Amarillo Zoo after this image went viral. So should this creature reappear, there should be plenty of proof to determine what it is.
September 2018, Saskatchewan, Canada. A local fishing guide is going about a normal day in his lodge when he spies something strange out his window. Something dark and hairy is huddled on the ground amongst the trees. At first, it looks like a small bear, and then it stands and nearly triples in height. It's a huge wolf, and we only understand its scale when it lunges at the regular-sized dog who's defensively barking. The animals quarrel until the man goes to intervene. Let's see that again.
This large shape suddenly becomes animated and springs up and charges at the dog. And much to my shock and horror, it appears to be a wolf of mind-boggling proportions. It's truly monstrous.
Field researcher Ken Gerhardt tells us of the giant wolf's prominent stature in folklore.
There have long been legends of monstrous, bloodthirsty wolves. In France, we have the beast of Gévaudan. In Alaska, there's something known as the Amarok, or demon wolf. And nearby in the Nahanni Valley of Canada, we have something known as the Wahila. The Nahanni Valley is also known as the Headless Valley because the decapitated bodies of prospectors and trappers have been found there and have been linked to the legend of this giant wolf-like Wahila. So we have these long enduring traditions of giant wolves, and we have to wonder if there might be a grain of truth to this legend.
Some have speculated that this wolf might be more familiar than we think, a creature not from the realm of legend, but from our own prehistory.
The largest gray wolves, Canis lupus, have been known to achieve weights of about 200 pounds. But if we go back over 10,000 years ago to the Pleistocene epoch, there were these monstrous bone-crushing wolves known as dire wolves, Canis dirus. A relic population of dire wolves may have survived as recently as 4,000 years ago in Arkansas's Ozarks. We could be dealing with a dire wolf genetic code that's been locked into modern wolves and is now resurfacing in this remarkable individual.
An interesting note about that French beast of Gévaudan. Though that monster wolf lived on and kept killing after being driven off by a young boy, that kid was rewarded for his bravery. King Louis XV paid for his education. Now let's get the educated opinion on this specimen.
Could there be something off about this wolf's genetics? Some sort of mutation? There is a phenomenon called an atavism, where a creature has traits from its ancestors preserved in its genes. However, it's unlikely in this case, as atavisms aren't likely to manifest in the form of a canine size. An extra toe is more likely. Then what's going on here? Wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler isn't crying wolf, she's crying hoax.
To me, it didn't look like the dog was in danger. That was really suspicious. So that's what makes me think that it was CGI.
When someone suspects a fake, we call in Michael Primo, our forensic video analyst.
It's my conclusion that there is no additional information that was introduced into these recordings that would be similar to something that was CGI'd or manufactured.
With the clip appearing to be legitimate, biologist Floyd Hayes discusses the creature's resemblance to the dire wolf.
The dire wolf is a little bit larger than a wolf with a larger head and smaller feet.
What's more, the dire wolf had shorter, stockier legs to keep them warmer during the cold winter months. The wolf we see here is proportioned much more similarly to our modern-day canine. So with all other possibilities unlikely, Hayes says it's just a gray wolf. But there's a surprise. He did a size calculation and found this specimen to be one of the largest wolves ever documented. Hayes says the dog looks like a type of husky, which tend to grow a little over 2 feet tall and around 60 pounds. And the wolf looks about 1.5 times larger than the dog here. Hayes guesses this wolf is about 3 feet tall and 6.5 feet from end to end. That's longer than most men are tall. And what's more, it's nearly a record. Compared to the largest wolf ever recorded, Hayes thinks this is only half an inch shorter. So this wolf is truly a gargantuan. Incredible.
Our verdict, an actual wolf who just happens to be quite large for his species. This is not a supernatural creature, but he is an outlier. How he got that big is still a mystery. But we know he's a loner who probably branched off to form his own pack.
Tartu, Estonia, October 2021. Johan Uibapu receives a disturbing phone call from his mother regarding her chicken coop. He offers to take a look, but nothing could prepare him for what he finds.
Oh boy. Their tail is really tangled.
That's an understatement. Let's take another look. What looks like a heap of black rats is actually a heap of black rats with their tails hopelessly entangled together. There are 13 rats in this bundle bound together for life.
One of them, unfortunately, looks like it has passed on to the next world. And maybe that's for the best. I wouldn't want to be tied to a bunch of my brothers and sisters either.
Would you believe that this isn't the first time a knot of rats like this has been discovered? It's even got a name, the Rat King.
The term rat king is thought to originate from German. It's a number of rats whose tails have become entangled so that they are basically like a rodent superorganism. An older, wiser rat would sit atop a pile of younger rats, and they would serve all of his needs. Unfortunately for rat kings, they are considered to be bad omens. It's thought that they warn of the plague. They're also associated with witchcraft.
Because of this, in old Strasbourg, where rat kings were found, they were usually drowned in a well or dunked in boiling water before being brought to the local school teacher to study them. Because of their supernatural associations and the rarity of their occurrences, there's debate as to whether or not rat kings are cruel, man-made hoaxes.
There is a long history of fabricating creatures for profit. Think about P.T. Barnum's Fiji Mermaid, George Hull's Cardiff Giant. Back in the day, people would take lizards and glue bat wings on them and say, here, buy a dragon. Or they'd stick a narwhal horn on a horse and say, this is a unicorn. So a hoax is definitely not outside the realm of possibility.
Knots are complicated. There's a whole area of mathematics called knot theory, dedicated to studying these things in the abstract. And the knots of the Rat King tales are complex too. Scientists have attempted to recreate them, and they quickly discovered it was a lot harder than expected. The knots they made looked too neat and intentional. And those rats were dead. Let's turn to our experts to see what they think about this whole thing.
First, we turn to biologist Floyd Hayes to find out, is this real? And if so, how the heck does something like this happen?
One possibility is that it was faked and somebody actually stuck the tails together. But it could also be a natural phenomenon, and I think that's most likely in this case. It's been suggested that perhaps they are stuck together from birth, but that seems very unlikely because these are fairly well grown and they would likely starve to death if they were stuck together for a few weeks.
So if they weren't destined at birth to become parts of a rat king, how do they form?
So a rat king occurs when the tails are stuck together. This usually happens in black rats, which have unusually long tails compared to other species of rats. And it happens mostly in cold countries during the winter months. And it is believed that their tails are frozen together overnight when they're huddling together for warmth by water or urine or sperm or food.
However, in a bizarre twist, when we do some research of our own, we find that temperatures in this area of Estonia only had a low of 36 degrees Fahrenheit the night before this rat king was found. Not cold enough to freeze. And what's more, rats, contrary to their reputation, groom themselves nearly as much as cats. The idea that they could get stuck together with dirt and grime seems unlikely. So we turn to wildlife biologist Stephanie Shuttler. She says the Rat King legend carries a grain of truth.
Rats can be carriers of diseases and parasites. So the fact that people thought rat kings were bad omens or carriers or signals of plague, it's not that unreasonable of a leap.
It might just be coincidence, but the COVID-19 epidemic was still ravaging Europe when this video was shot. And Shuttler says there's another question gnawing at her. Why do these rats lie down and accept their fates? Why don't they fight back?
When animals are stuck or trying to escape from something, they can do things like chew their own appendage off. Like this has happened in leg traps with animals like coyotes or wolves. Why aren't these rats chewing their own tails off to get away?
Our verdict? It seems like rat kings form naturally. But what we don't know is the why of it all. Why aren't there more rat kings? And why don't these rats make more of an effort to escape? It remains an unexplained mystery.